Richard Sterling was a luxury broker whose ego was bigger than his commission checks. Tonight, he was rubbing shoulders with Seattle's billionaires, completely unaware he was about to end his own career. The unveiling gala for the Aurora, a $2 billion skyscraper project, was in full swing, promising to completely redefine the city skyline. Richard stood near a towering, meticulously detailed architectural model, swirling a glass of Dom Perignon. He flashed his heavy Rolex every time he gestured, the exact kind of guy who calculated your net worth before bothering to learn your name. A few feet away stood Leo. He was a 14-year-old boy in a simple, slightly faded polo shirt and scuffed sneakers, looking completely out of place among the city's elite. He was talking animatedly to a friend, pointing at the intricate lattice work of the model's core. "That right there," Leo said, his voice brimming with raw, unfiltered pride. "My mom designed that. It's the load-bearing system. Without her, the whole thing would snap in half." It was innocent. It was completely factual. But to a guy like Richard, it was an offensive joke. Richard stepped right into the kid's personal space. He made sure his voice was intentionally loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding investors. He looked Leo up and down, a sneer plastered firmly across his face. "Cute story, kid, but I've seen your mom on site. She's hauling blueprints and making coffee. Don't lie to these gentlemen." Richard took a slow sip of champagne, relishing the dead quiet of the onlookers watching a grown man humiliate a teenager. Leo's face flushed a deep crimson, but he didn't lower his eyes. The boy's hands balled into tight fists at his sides. "She is the lead structural engineer," Leo said. His voice trembled, but he stood his ground. "Her name is Elena Carter." Richard threw his head back and laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that made several bystanders physically cringe. "Lead engineer? A woman like that?" Richard mocked. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Listen, kid, people who look like your mom don't build empires. They sweep up after them." The tension in the air was suffocating. Every eye locked on the smirking broker, waiting for the kid to finally break. The silence that followed Richard's cruel declaration hung heavy over the velvet-lined lobby. Leo's chest heaved as he fought back tears of raw frustration, but he held his ground. Richard, completely misinterpreting the boy's silence as submission, turned to the nearest cluster of investors. They were a group of older men holding heavy scotch glasses. He offered them an exasperated shrug. "Let the contractors bring their kids to work once, and suddenly they own the place," he chuckled. Richard leaned back, swirling his champagne, completely oblivious that his career was about to go through a wood chipper. Then the crowd parted, not out of respect, but out of sheer startled confusion. Elena Carter walked in, covered in drywall dust and hauling a battered tube of blueprints. She looked like she had just crawled out of a trench, but the way she moved made Millionaire step aside. She didn't shrink under the billionaire's stares. Her steel-toed boots cracked against the marble floor as she walked straight toward Richard. Richard's eyes darted to Elena, and his smirk widened into a grotesque mask of predatory amusement. He actually thought his punchline had just arrived. "Ah, speak of the devil," Richard announced loudly, his voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers overhead. "Here comes the cleanup crew now." He took a confident step toward her, extending his champagne glass in a mocking salute. "Looking for the service elevator, sweetheart? Your kid here's been telling these gentlemen you designed this building. You might want to teach him how to lie better." He looked around, eagerly waiting for the polite chuckles from the elites.
desperate for any validation of his cruel wit. Elena didn't flinch. She just stared at him, dissecting his cheap arrogance like a bad structural draft. She stopped exactly 3 feet from Richard, looking at his slicked silver hair, his gleaming Daytona watch, and the arrogant tilt of his chin. Then she simply checked the battered Casio watch on her own wrist. Her stillness was unnerving. She wasn't radiating fear. She was radiating absolute certainty.
It seemed remarkably comfortable speaking about things you absolutely do not understand, Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the hum of the lobby like a surgical scalpel. She shifted the blueprint tube to her other hand and locked her gaze squarely with his. Richard bristled, his fragile ego deeply wounded by her total lack of intimidation. "Excuse me?" he snapped. He stepped closer, attempting to use his tailored presence to physically tower over her. "I know exactly what you are. You're trespassing. Get out before I have security drag you out." Elena didn't back away. Instead, she offered a faint, almost pitying smile. It was time to make her final move and spring the trap. "Is that your final professional assessment, Mr. Sterling?" she asked softly, her eyes flicking over his shoulder toward the main double doors of the ballroom. "Because you're about to explain that assessment to the man who writes your checks." Before Richard could snap back, the VIP doors busted open. Arthur Vance, the billionaire bankrolling the project, stormed into the foyer, flanked by anxious suits. Seeing his ultimate boss, Richard's arrogant posture instantly dissolved into desperate, pathetic sycophancy. He slapped on a fake smile and stepped right into Vance's path with his hand out. "Mr. Vance, Richard Sterling. I was just handling a minor trespassing issue with some of the site laborers to ensure the gala remains pristine for our top-tier investors." Vance didn't even blink at Richard. He stepped right past the extended hand, treating the luxury broker as if he were nothing more than an ugly piece of furniture. The billionaire strode directly toward the woman in the dusty boots. To the absolute shock of the murmuring crowd, Vance extended both hands, grasping Elena's with profound, undeniable reverence. "Elena, thank God! The board is threatening to pull out. Get in there. They need to hear this from the lead engineer." The blood drained from Richard's face. He stood completely paralyzed as the glass of Dom Carignan slipped through his numb fingers, shattering violently against the marble floor. Elena didn't gloat. She simply unrolled the battered blueprint and cast a sideways glance back at the trembling broker. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice echoing clearly across the dead silent room. "Before we talk about your building, Vance, we need to talk about your broker. He just told my son that people who look like us don't build empires. We only clean up after them. If this is the kind of arrogant incompetence you have representing the Aurora project, Vance, I'm questioning if this firm is even worth my time." Vance turned slowly, his eyes locked onto Richard like a sniper's crosshairs. The billionaire didn't shout. He didn't have to. "Sterling," Vance growled, the word dripping with absolute, unfiltered disgust. "You are stripped of your commission, your credentials, and your access to this building. Clear out your desk by morning. You're finished in Seattle." Richard didn't say a single word. He backed away, eyes wide with horror, retreating through the lobby. His leather shoes crunched over the broken glass as he fled. The elite crowd watched him go, their faces hardened into masks of pure contempt. He was a dead man walking in their world. Elena didn't even bother watching him leave. She turned her attention entirely back to Leo, who was staring at his mother with wide, awestruck eyes. She smiled, the
the coldness vanishing completely from her face, and squeezed his shoulder. "Never let a man in a cheap suit tell you what a real builder looks like," she whispered to him, before turning to lead the billionaire into the boardroom. Richard thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. If you love instant karma, hit subscribe. See you in the next one.